Okay, so one of the things in my mind is how to teach people programming and what are the steps in teaching someone programming. And if we look at web development, in a way it can be structured into three basic things, which is HTML, markup, CSS, style, and GS logic and interaction. And then to keep it simple, we'll just use API, which is interact with data. So API can be PHP, Ruby, whatever you want. The markup, is required for the CSS style. And the GS logic, when it comes to interaction, it can get data, and then that data makes itself seen or interacted with the HTML. That's that line. Sometimes I hate when these things are not perfect, but let's just do it like this. Okay. So in a way, web development covers all this. In today's world of WordPress, usually everything is pre-made, and the main task, like main task in WordPress world, is actually CSS style. Sometimes something might need to change in the way that the markup is done. So the HTML markup needs to be changed. To change the HTML markup, let's say there is rendered markup on page load. So this one is there when the page refreshes. So rarely you will need to do this. And depending on the plugins and the technology, changing the rendered markup can be complicated. Most of the time, it's easier to use JavaScript to interact with it. And I think that this is CSS style is like the core of the tasks with the HTML markup, and to actually be able to complete certain tasks, you might need to change the markup. I'll repeat because it's so funny when you there's no script, right? So let's say I have a page and I need to change a button to be color different. That can be easily done with CSS style. Because of the way the CSS style works, there is a lot of logic on changing a style. For example, there are the before and after attributes. So let's say you want to put something before or after an element. CSS allows you to do that. And it's relatively simple do once you get the hang of it. Let's say that sometimes now I need to pull some HTML structure, but I want to keep everything in the chart. Let's say that actually, let me just pause. Okay, so I resumed. So I'll refresh the page just for sake of it. Now, let's say I want to change this button to be a different color. I can just see here what actually dictates the class, because the browser makes my job so easy. I can just copy this, and I know by using the entire thing, I can write the CSS that works here. When there is a comma, it says that the CSS applies to a set of things. So, for example, this CSS applies when something is in the class axis card and there is a button. Axis media, there's a button. Axis content main within a form, but button. Well, that's not ATFB form. So if I just want to play with it, I can just say here color red, and the color of the text is red. Background blue. Background is blue. Relatively simple. Now, if I want to put a text under the button, what can I do? Well, there is this thing. I don't know how to do it from the editor, but let's just go and do some custom CSS. So this is the area we'll play with. The WordPress customizer makes things simple, but essentially no matter what you're changing or customizing, to some extent you can add CSS in there or modify. But it's usually, depending on the case, best to add and not modify. Depends what you're building. If you're customizing something existent, it's better to add on top of it. So I want to change this button. I copy this. I put it here. This means any button that is displayed like this will be changed. For example, here I can see axis card. So it's clear that that one from there. So I put this. I'll just say background blue. Live preview makes it quick. Now let's say I want to add something for the hover. On the hover it's green. So just put hover red, right? Now let's say I want to put the text under that, under this button. I can either put it with PHP, because this template is rendered with PHP, or I can inject it with JavaScript, or I can use CSS. Usually when you customize a site, you're customizing your own site, or one specific site. You're not customizing a stack of sites. And you don't need to, it's very unlikely that you need to make something international. In inner commerce, everything can be changed, any string, text, whatever, and we don't have anything injected with CSS. But here, you can see I added after here, inside the button, I added the word test. With CSS. If I wanted to change that text, normally I would have to consider that there might be a translation string to change. But for example, let me show you a trick. Font size 0. I have replaced the text of the button using a CSS trick where I made the font size of this to be 0, but the text that I injected with after the content test to be 15 pixels. I've made a CSS hack to change the text of a button. So normally this said continue reading, and I can call it read more. And I changed it with CSS. I didn't have to go for this specific thing. I would have to go and change the text for the WordPress translation. But because I wanted to do this quick, I did it like this. This is not recommended because this is very unclean, right? But this is a very hackish way to change a text. It's possible because this is a trick. Now, let's say I wanted to add this under the button, right? How could I do that? Well, there is this A element. So first of all, let's remove this. So there is access card. Let's change the text. Clicking the button will open on a new page. So there is the access card. So let's find out where is that is. This. Okay, access card. And there is an article. And there is an A. I don't know how these classes were picked, but okay. So now I have there the text, right? Well, maybe I want to have it under the button, right? So I can just do a clear both. Not sure. Maybe a display block. Right, display block. So now it's under. Let's say I want to have a font size of 20 pixels, of 10, 15. I want a different color. And I want to have some space. So using CSS, I have injected in the page markup, because CSS allows you to put in a way markup in the page now. So what I want to point out with this, depending on for who and how fast and how comfortable you are with what you need to solve, knowing that you can solve a problem in multiple ways, depending on the case, you can just rely on CSS or JavaScript. So I put this here. With CSS in WordPress, I can quickly come in and throw additional CSS. If I had to modify the template, if there was no child theme, I would have had to generate a child theme or make a plugin and then inject the template to change it. I would have had to copy this template, and then I would have had to edit the markup and add this here, the text in blank or under a span or whatever. But with CSS, I didn't have to do any of that. So CSS style is actually the most critical part, because usually tasks are about changing how something looks or changing what something is displayed. So CSS and JS, both of them, if you know CSS and JavaScript, usually any task can be sorted, which is about what is displayed. Let's take another example. So this was basic. I want to, I don't know, change. I want to hide something. So let's say I want to hide this date. Again, I need to go into template. I need to edit the template, copy it, duplicate it, or I just change the theme directly, which is even worse than the CSS trick. So this CSS trick can be a good solution depending on where you're at with your project. So let's hide that date. We already made it clear that we use this axis card, which opens up the gate there. So we have axis card, then article, and then P. So we need to take the class for the P, very important. The reason I put these is to point out that it takes the first element inside. So an axis card, article, because if there was a different element here before in which article would have resided, the CSS would not apply because of this. So, and then we have subtitle. So we need to hide VR and post it on. So span, if we do this display none, it's all hidden. So we need to hide span VR, and then we need to copy this. If we do something like less or CSS, we could do this much more simple and clean, but just use CSS. So I just hid the posted on. This could be a theme setting, so that should also be checked. But if you don't have a theme setting and you want to hide something, this is how simple it is to hide it just with CSS. It's very quick. And all I need to do is just click publish and it's saved. I'll just copy the link. If I go now on the home page, it's there. So yeah, CSS can be a thing. Now, how long would have this take to do with code? Let's just take, for example, this would have been the axis theme. This page would have been the index, I suppose. So it's template parts content. And this was content single post, I think. Yeah. So the separator here, normally only with PHP, I could inject this function. So let's remove. If I want to color the buttons different, I still need to do that. So let's just remove everything. Now let's assume I would create a plugin. Here, if you notice something in PHP called function exists, if you just create your function and register it before this one, and to get this effect, you cannot do it from a plugin. You need to do it from a child theme. I can just say nothing. It can just be blank. Now if I refresh, there will be no date there, because this was the function that was responsible of displaying the posted on. Normally that line shouldn't have been there, but that's how it is. Or a different option is, if I go in the theme directly, which is a blunter, I just delete that part, including the slash. Yeah, so it's not this one. I guess it's this one. No. Whoa. So I'm having a lot of fun. So archive, template parts, content. It's just content. This two are not even used. This team was built by someone that was delegated, but he did a poor job. Whatever, I'll fix it. So just by editing the template, this was the quickest way to do it actually. But now if I update the theme, my changes are gone. So when you edit the template in the theme directly, you pretty much screw yourself up because you cannot update. If you're okay with that, then you're good. But normally, whenever you work on your own project, the first thing you want to do, depending on what you're building, the first thing you want to do is build a child theme. Especially in WordPress, you have the main theme and then you build a child theme. This makes it more simple to customize it. In my case, when we work with customers, we don't rely on child themes. Rather, we create dedicated plugins. But we rarely modify what's there. We rather create their own separate components or their own separate way of showing things, and the theme is used as a skeleton. This makes it more stronger on the long term because it makes the changes and additions not depend on the theme, rather depend on the ecosystem, which is the inner commerce plugin, dependent on something. But if we ever want to change the theme, we can do it. So yeah, this is a brain dump on how to be effective in WordPress and how CSS is actually one of the main skills someone needs to have in WordPress for most of the things that people need, because they're all minor, simple details, and CSS can handle all of them. I think like 50-60% of the WordPress tasks are CSS, maybe 80%. And let's say that 50% of the tasks are CSS, 30% are plugins, and 20% are customizations. This is on a general basis, and in most projects there's no plugin customizations, there's just CSS. I'm tired, but yeah, so this is just a brain dump on why the key to WordPress is CSS. Let's call it that.